Here's what I've come to believe after years of growing food and medicine and making every mistake a person can make in a backyard. The most sophisticated survival toolkit in the world is already growing in your yard, or in the crack of your neighbor's pavement, or along the edge of the road where the lawnmower can't quite reach. It's there, and it's free. And it's been waiting for you to stop treating it like a problem. Today we're talking about 7 perennial native greens that thrive on neglect. Plants rooted in American soil that come back year after year without being asked, that feed you and heal you, and ask almost nothing in return. These aren't exotic imports that need coddling. These are the plants that belong here. And once you learn to see them, you will never look at your yard the same way again. Let's start with the one in the sidewalk crack. Yarrow, Achillea millefolium, gets its name from the Greek hero Achilles, who according to legend used it to stop the bleeding wounds of his soldiers on the battlefield. Medieval healers called it soldier's woundwort and staunchweed. It was stuffed into wounds during the Civil War when bandages ran out. It has been used continuously as a medicinal plant for over 3,000 years across multiple continents, and right now there is almost certainly some growing within a quarter mile of wherever you are sitting. Yarrow is native across most of North America. It grows in poor soil, compacted soil, dry soil, and the kind of neglected side yard dirt that would make a conventional gardener weep. It tolerates drought with the kind of cheerful indifference that most plants reserve for perfect conditions. It spreads slowly by rhizome, which means once you have it, it will quietly expand its territory without ever becoming aggressive about it. The feathery, fern-like leaves are edible in small amounts, particularly when young and tender in early spring, and make a pungent, slightly bitter addition to salads. The flowers, flat-topped clusters of white or pale pink, are edible too, and they draw in an almost absurd quantity of beneficial insects. Parasitic wasps, hoverflies, ladybugs, lacewings. Yarrow is basically a free pest control subscription for your entire garden. The medicinal applications are significant and well documented. Yarrow tea has been used for generations to break fevers by promoting sweating. A poultice of fresh leaves pressed against a small cut will slow bleeding noticeably. The plant contains achylleic acid, which promotes clotting. As an anti-inflammatory, it rivals some commercial preparations. It can be tinctured in alcohol, dried for tea, made into a salve for skin irritation, or simply grabbed fresh from the garden in an emergency. If you want to establish yarrow intentionally rather than just waiting to spot it, it's incredibly easy from seed. Direct sow in fall or early spring, barely cover with soil and let the cold stratification do its work. Or just dig up a clump from a wild patch. Yarrow transplants readily. Give it a sunny spot with terrible drainage and zero fertilizer and watch it absolutely refuse to die. In the vegetable garden, it's a companion plant worth keeping around, attracting predatory insects and reportedly improving the essential oil content of herbs grown nearby. The old farmers weren't wrong when they said a little yarrow in the garden makes everything else grow better. If yarrow is the warrior of this list, then wood sorrel, Oxalis stricta and its various native cousins, is the quiet friend who always has a snack. Most people know it as that small plant with heart-shaped leaves in groups of 3 that shows up in lawns, garden beds, and basically any disturbed soil from Maine to California. Children know it instinctively. You probably chewed on it as a kid without knowing what it was, drawn to that bright, clean sourness that hits your tongue the second you bite down. That flavor is oxalic acid, the same compound that makes rhubarb tart and gives spinach its slight bite. In reasonable quantities, and wood sorrel consumed as a food rather than a supplement is very much a reasonable quantity. It's perfectly safe and genuinely delicious. The leaves, stems, and small yellow flowers are all edible raw, and they bring a lemon flavor to food without requiring you to have a lemon. Toss them into salads, blend them into sauces, float them in water for a light, refreshing drink. Add them to grain bowls as a bright counterpoint to heavier ingredients. They wilt quickly when cooked, so the best applications are raw or added at the very end of cooking. Wood sorrel is perennial in most of the US. It dies back in hard freezes but returns reliably from its root system. It spreads by seed and by those tiny rhizomes, And in a garden bed, it can become a low-ground cover that suppresses other weeds if you let it spread a bit. Some gardeners fight it. Others, once they taste it, decide to just harvest it continuously instead of pulling it. The second approach is considerably more pleasant. From a nutritional standpoint, wood sorrel is a source of vitamin C, which made it historically valuable as a remedy for scurvy during long winters or ocean voyages. Native American tribes across the continent used various species of oxalis as food, and early European settlers quickly adopted it because it was everywhere, and it worked. There's something quietly powerful about that. A plant so nutritionally practical that two completely different culinary traditions independently figured out the same use for it. Lamb's quarters, Chenopodium album, is sometimes called wild spinach. And if you've ever grown spinach through a hot summer and watched it bolt into bitterness while you were at work on a Tuesday, you will understand why this plant deserves your attention. Lamb's quarters does not bolt. Lamb's quarters does not become bitter in the heat. Lamb's quarters grows taller and bushier and leafier as summer progresses, producing an almost continuous supply of tender greens from late spring until the first hard freeze, and it does all of this in soil that would embarrass your spinach. Technically, lamb's quarters is a cosmopolitan weed. It's found on every inhabited continent, but it has been growing in North America long enough that several native subspecies exist, and it has been a food plant here for thousands of years. Archaeologists have found lamb's quarters seeds in ancient Native American food caches. It was a staple food during the Dust Bowl, when it was one of the only things still producing in depleted soil. It is remarkably nutritious, higher in calcium than kale, with significant iron, vitamin A, and vitamin C content, and it tastes good, which is not something every highly nutritious green can claim. Young leaves can be eaten raw in salads, where they have a mild, slightly mineral flavor. Larger leaves are best lightly sautéed in butter or olive oil, which brings out a richness similar to good spinach. They can be blanched and frozen for winter use, stirred into soups, layered into lasagna anywhere you'd use spinach, or blended into smoothies if that's your preference. The seeds, which the plant produces in enormous quantities in late summer, can be ground into flour or used whole like quinoa. They're in the same family, actually, which explains the nutritional similarities. Growing lamb's quarters is almost a contradiction in terms, because it will grow itself. If you have a garden, you probably already have it. The trick is learning to recognize the seedlings. Small, diamond-shaped leaves with a waxy, whitish coating on the underside, and deciding not to pull them. Let a few grow to maturity and they will self-seed reliably, giving you an essentially permanent, free supply of summer greens. If you want to start intentionally, surface sow seeds in spring after the last frost and thin to about a foot apart. They'll handle the rest. There's a plant called purslane, Portulata oleracea, that has the distinction of being one of the most nutritionally dense plants on Earth while simultaneously appearing on virtually every common garden weeds list ever published. It is thick-stemmed and succulent, low-growing, with small paddle-shaped leaves and a satisfying crunch. It spreads across bare soil with enthusiasm. Gardeners pull it by the armful and throw it in the compost, not knowing they are throwing away one of the best dietary sources of omega-3 fatty acids in the plant kingdom. Let that land for a moment. Omega-3s, the fatty acids we take fish oil supplements and eat expensive salmon to obtain, are present in purslane in concentrations higher than almost any other leafy green. It also contains significant amounts of vitamins C, E, and A, as well as magnesium, calcium, potassium, and iron. For a plant that asks nothing, no water, no care, no fertilizer, and that grows in cracked asphalt and neglected corners, this is an almost implausible nutritional profile. Purslane has been eaten as a vegetable across the Middle East, Europe, and Asia for centuries, and Native American tribes in the Southwest used it extensively. In the US, it's still largely dismissed as a weed, which is frankly our loss. The flavor is mild and slightly lemony with a hint of the mineral richness you get from other succulent plants. Young stems and leaves are excellent raw. Toss them into salads, grain bowls, or slaws where their crunch is an asset. They can be lightly pickled in vinegar, which preserves that texture beautifully and creates a condiment that brightens up heavy winter dishes. They can be cooked briefly in stir-fries or added to soups at the end, though extended heat makes them a bit mucilaginous, similar to okra, which, if you like okra, is not a problem at all. In the garden, purslane is easy to maintain as a harvested plant rather than a weed. Simply cut what you need, leave the root system, and it will continue producing. It thrives in full sun and hot, dry conditions. Summer's worst is purslane's best. It's annual in most of the US, but it self-seeds so prolifically that it effectively behaves as a perennial. Once it's in your garden, it will return every year without any intervention from you. Stinging nettles, Urtica dioica, require a brief acknowledgement up front. Yes, they sting. The hollow silica needles on the leaves and stems inject a cocktail of histamine, formic acid, and a few other compounds when they contact skin, producing a burning, itching sensation that can last anywhere from a few minutes to a few hours depending on your sensitivity. This is admittedly a notable characteristic in a food plant. It is also completely irrelevant once the plant is cooked or dried because heat and drying both neutralize the sting entirely. Nettles grow across most of the northern United States and much of Canada, particularly in moist, nitrogen-rich soil near streams, woodland edges, and the kind of neglected corners where old compost piles used to be. They spread vigorously by rhizome and, once established, will produce harvests indefinitely. They are one of the earliest plants to emerge in spring. New growth appears while it's still genuinely cold, which makes them a critical early-season food source when the garden hasn't started producing yet. Nutritionally, nettles are extraordinary. They contain more protein per unit weight than almost any other leafy vegetable. They're high in iron, genuinely high, not marketing speak high, as well as calcium, magnesium, vitamins A, C, and K, and a range of polyphenols with antioxidant effects. The traditional use of nettle tea to support kidney function and reduce inflammation is backed by a reasonable amount of modern research. Nettle root has been studied for its effects on benign prostate enlargement. As a medicinal plant, nettle has a depth of application that keeps researchers busy. For cooking, the young spring tops, the top 4 to 6 inches of new growth, are the most tender and flavorful. Blanch them for 2 minutes in boiling water. This neutralizes the sting immediately and takes the edge off the strong flavor. Then, treat them like cooked spinach. They make an extraordinary soup, a rich pasta filling, a savory galette, or a simple side dish with garlic and olive oil. Dried nettles steeped as tea have a surprisingly pleasant, slightly grassy flavor. Nettle beer has been brewed in the British Isles for centuries. The plant's fiber has historically been used to make cloth. Wartime European countries used it as a cotton substitute when imports were cut off. Harvest with gloves and long sleeves. Use scissors and a bag. That's the only real skill involved. Everything else is just recognizing where they grow and going back to cut more. Ramps, Allium tricoccum, are the darlings of the spring foraging world, and with good reason. These wild leeks emerge from the forest floor in early spring, their broad, smooth green leaves pushing through the leaf litter before most trees have leafed out. They smell powerfully of garlic and onion simultaneously, a scent that hits you from several feet away in a good patch. And they taste even better than they smell. For about 3 to 4 weeks in April and May, depending on your latitude, ramps are available in abundance. Then they die back completely, disappearing underground until the following spring. Ramps grow from the mid-Atlantic through the Midwest and into the Upper South, with concentrations in Appalachia, where they've been a spring tradition for generations. Ramp festivals happen in West Virginia, North Carolina, and Tennessee every spring. Communities that have been eating them for a century aren't confused about whether they're good. This is a food culture built around a plant, and the plant deserves that respect. Every part of a ramp is edible. The leaves are mild and can be eaten raw in salads or cooked like any leafy green. The bulb is more pungent and is excellent pickled, roasted, charred on a grill, or used raw in any place you'd use garlic or onion for maximum flavor impact. The pinkish stem connecting leaf to bulb can be used throughout. Fermented ramps, lacto-fermented in brine, preserve them beyond their brief season, and develop a complex, funky flavor that works in everything from grain bowls to sandwiches to cocktails. If you're establishing ramps in your yard, know up front that they're slow. They need a deciduous canopy, rich, moist soil, and a few years to settle in. Plant bulbs or transplants in fall in partial to full shade in soil amended with leaf compost. Don't harvest the first 2 years. Let the patch establish. By year 3 or 4, you'll have a self-sustaining colony that expands gradually and produces indefinitely. Never take more than 1 leaf per plant per season if you're harvesting from an established patch. The plant needs its leaves to photosynthesize through spring. A managed ramp patch in the right conditions is one of the most valuable things a yard can have. A permanent, self-perpetuating food source that asks only for shade and patience. The last plant on this list doesn't get nearly the attention it deserves outside of herbal circles. And that's a genuine shame because it is one of the most practical edible plants in the American landscape. Watercress, Nasturtium officinale, grows wild in clean, cold streams and spring seeps across a huge swath of North America. And in the right conditions in a home garden, it will spread to fill a container or a wet spot with vigorous, peppery greens from spring through fall, dying back in hard freezes and returning reliably in spring. Watercress is native to Europe and Asia, but has naturalized so thoroughly across American waterways that it's been used by Native American tribes and incorporated into regional food cultures everywhere it's found. In the Ozarks, in Appalachia, in the mountain streams of the Carolinas and Virginia, watercress is a spring staple that generations of families harvested from the same seeps year after year. The tradition is old enough that it's effectively cultural knowledge in those regions. The flavor is bright and peppery, similar to arugula but cleaner and more distinctly green. Young growth is mild enough for salads. Mature growth has a stronger bite that works well cooked. Watercress soup is a classic preparation that takes the edge off the pepper and produces something surprisingly elegant. It can be blended with cream and a little onion into a smooth, bright green soup that tastes considerably more sophisticated than its ingredients suggest. Raw, it's exceptional in sandwiches. The British have been putting it in sandwiches for centuries, and they were right to do so. It wilts beautifully into stir-fries, enriches egg dishes, and makes a peppery pesto that outperforms conventional basil versions in savory applications. Nutritionally, watercress is in the brassica family, which tells you something about its vitamin K, vitamin C, and glucosinolate content. It's been called one of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet by several nutritional analyses, and while those rankings are always somewhat arbitrary, the underlying point stands. This is a highly nutritious plant with a genuinely delicious flavor that grows in running water you probably walk past regularly without harvesting. For home cultivation, watercress does need water, consistently moist to wet conditions, but it doesn't strictly require running water. A large container kept consistently full of water, changed regularly to prevent stagnation, will support a productive watercress plant. A garden area with naturally boggy soil near a downspout is ideal. If you have a small stream or spring seep on your property, watercress will essentially grow itself once established. Harvest regularly to prevent flowering and keep the plant producing tender new growth. I want to leave you with something I've been thinking about for a while now, which is the question of what it means to pay attention. Most of us live in places where the landscape around us is legible in certain ways. We know the grocery store, the coffee shop, the pharmacy. We know the routes and the prices and the hours. But the land itself, the actual ground under our feet, has become a kind of visual noise that we filter out. We see green and we think maintenance problem. We see a crack in the pavement with something growing in it, and we think nuisance. What I'm describing in this video isn't really about survival, though Yarrow stopping a cut from bleeding or lamb's quarters feeding a family through a difficult season are not trivial things. What I'm really talking about is a shift in how you read the world around you. Because once you know that the silvery plant pushing through that sidewalk crack is the same plant Achilles used on the battlefield, the same plant Civil War surgeons reached for when they ran out of supplies, the same plant that has been quietly healing people for 3,000 years. Once you know that, the world gets bigger. Not smaller, bigger, more layered, more interesting. These 7 plants, yarrow, wood sorrel, lamb's quarters, purslane, stinging nettles, ramps, and watercress, are not a complete list. There are dozens of others, but they're a beginning. They're common enough that most of you will be able to find at least 2 or 3 of them within walking distance of your home. They're safe, well-documented, and useful. And they represent something I genuinely believe, that the most sophisticated garden is not the one that works hardest, but the one that understands what's already there. Learn one plant this season. Really learn it. Where it grows, what it looks like at different stages, how it tastes raw and cooked, what it does medicinally. Let it change how you see that one small corner of the world. Then learn another one next season. You don't have to pull them all at once. The good thing about perennials is that they wait. They've been doing it for centuries. They'll wait for you.